So, good morning, students. So, today we are going to discuss about meningitis. So, coming to definition of meningitis, meningitis is infection of the subarachnoid space. Already we discussed in the last previous class. Again, we will briefly describe about the meningitis. So, meningitis is nothing but infection of the meningeal tissue.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಇದು ಬರ್ತೇವೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಮೆಸೇಜ್ಗಳು
There are different
ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಆಗೇ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ ಮತ್ತೆ
norms are there. They are meningitis, encephalitis, meningoencephalitis, and cerebritis. So meningitis is infection of the subarachnoid space. Coming to encephalitis, encephalitis is infection of the brain parenchyma, and meningoencephalitis is infection of the both subarachnoid space and brain parenchyma. And coming to cerebritis or brain abscess is brain abscess is a focal infection of the brain parenchyma with a capsule, and cerebritis is a generalized infection of the cerebral parenchyma without a capsule. So coming to bacterial meningitis, it is an acute purulent infection within the subarachnoid space. So the various manifestations of these bacterial meningitis is it may lead to seizures or loss of consciousness with the coma. Sometimes they may present with intracranial pressures, and sometimes they may present with stroke also. And coming to presentation of meningitis, most of the times it may present as acute bacterial meningitis and subacute bacterial meningitis, and will lead to chronic bacterial meningitis if the infection is not treated well. Acute bacterial meningitis usually develops rapidly over a period of 24 hours, and most cause for acute bacterial meningitis is pyogenic bacterial meningitis. And next most common form of bacterial meningitis, subacute form of meningitis, usually develops over a period of 1 to 7 days. And common examples of subacute bacterial meningitis is tuberculous meningitis, fungal meningitis, and syphilitic meningitis. And another form of meningitis is chronic meningitis, chronic bacterial meningitis. Mostly it develops over a period of more than 7 days. And the common causes for these chronic meningitis is meningeal infections like tuberculous, fungal, and syphilitic meningitis may extend to chronic bacterial meningitis. And malignancy, some form of malignancy also may lead to chronic meningitis. And other non-infectious inflammatory disorders, chemical meningitis, and parameningeal infections may also develop chronic meningitis. So most often these microorganisms reach the meningitis by direct extension from the ears, nasopharynx, or cranial injuries, or some form of congenital meningeal defects. Sometimes microorganisms may enter into the subarachnoid space through the hematogenous spread from a distant infection, most common pulmonary tuberculosis. Suppose acute bacterial meningitis is not treated in the time, it may lead to fatal. Coming to common causes of acute bacterial meningitis, so most commonly it is due to Streptococcus pneumoniae. Majority of the more than 50% of the cases are due to Streptococcus pneumoniae, and remainder by Neisseria meningitis, Streptococci, Neisseria, Haemophilus influenza, and Staphylococcus aureus. So most common cause for acute bacterial meningitis is Streptococcus pneumonia. This is most commonly seen in more than 20 years of age group, and it is account for more than 50% of cases. Coming to incidence, it is responsible for 1.1 cases per 1 lakh people. And most common predisposing factor for this Streptococcus pneumonia meningitis is patients who have pneumonia and pneumococcal sinusitis with otitis media. They may also prone to develop Streptococcus meningitis, and patients who have chronic alcoholics and diabetic and patients with splenectomy, they are more prone to develop Streptococcus pneumonia meningitis. And patients with head injury also, they are also prone for development of meningitis with Streptococcus pneumonia. Suppose what happens if the infectory organisms are enter into the subarachnoid space. It causes an inflammatory reaction in the subarachnoid space, and the main pathological feature of this feature is a subarachnoid space is usually continuous around the brain, spinal cord, and optic nerves. So infection also reaches the ventricles either directly from choroid plexus or by reflex. So the main pathology is inflammatory reaction and along with some chemical mediators. So usually bacteria or their toxins, when they enter into the subarachnoid space, that results in the hyperemia of the meningeal venules and capillaries, and an increased permeability of these vessels leads to exudation of protein and migration of neutrophils into the subarachnoid space. Finally, they may develop elevated intracranial pressures. So coming to common manifestations of acute bacterial meningitis, so they may present with hyperepirexia, headache, photophobia, painful eye movements, fatigue, malaise, and vomiting. Sometimes patients may present with cutaneous rash, petechial rash. So this is the main important clue for meningitis, that is triad of meningitis. So fever, headache, and neck stiffness are the triad of meningitis. So coming to neck stiffness, that is resistance of the neck with passive flexion, that is also known as nuchal rigidity. And Kernick sign is elicitation of pain while extending the knee with the knee flexed over the abdomen position. And Brudzinski sign, passive flexion of the neck results in spontaneous flexion of the hip and knee. So coming to confirmation of acute bacterial meningitis, so say lumbar puncture and CSF analysis is very gold standard investigation. So in case of acute bacterial meningitis, usually the CSF analysis will show increased cells, that is polymorphonuclear cells more than 300, and glucose levels will be low and protein levels will be high. Coming to management of acute bacterial meningitis, usually after confirmation of the condition, we have to start the empirical antibiotic therapy. Usually it consists of a third generation cephalosporins along with corticosteroids with vancomycin, with or without. Suppose if the diagnosis is the organism, microorganism is known, so we have to alter the diagnosis, and minimum we have to continue the antibiotic therapy for a period of 7 days to 14 days. So coming to subacute form of meningitis, that is tuberculous meningitis. So tuberculous meningitis may present as subacute bacterial meningitis, or sometimes it may present as chronic bacterial meningitis. So tuberculous meningitis is usually caused by an acid-fast bacilli, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Sometimes it may be caused by other acid-fast bacilli like Mycobacterium bovis or Mycobacterium purpurea. But Mycobacterium tuberculosis is the most common cause. Coming to epidemiology of tuberculous meningitis, usually it kills or disables half of the patients with tuberculous meningitis. It is the most dangerous form of tuberculosis. It presents around 1% of all forms of the disease, and the incidence of this tuberculous meningitis has been fallen in Western countries, but in underdeveloped countries like India, tuberculous meningitis remains a common cause of bacterial meningitis, particularly in populations with high prevalence of HIV infection. So there is an association of HIV infection with the tuberculous meningitis, because before HIV infection, TB meningitis was most common in young children, and usually it is occurred as a complication of primary infection, most probably pulmonary tuberculosis. HIV co-infection usually increases the risk of all forms of tuberculosis, particularly the extrapulmonary forms like the tuberculous meningitis in adults. The risk of tuberculous meningitis increases as the CD4 count decreases, and HIV accelerates the course of bacterial infection with more frequent involvement of organs other than the lungs. So coming to risk factors for tuberculous meningitis, so number one is HIV co-infection is the most common risk factor, and other risk factors are unimmunized BCG vaccination, and the patients with malnutrition, or patients with chronic alcoholism, and diabetes mellitus, and substance abuse. So these all increase the incidence of tuberculosis meningitis. Coming to pathogenesis of tuberculosis meningitis, in first stage, bacterial seeding of the meninges and the subpile regions of the brain into the formation of tubercles. So this is a first stage that is called rich focus. So rich focus is nothing but bacterial seeding of the meninges and subpile regions with the formation of tubercles. So coming to second stage of tuberculosis meningitis, this rupture of this rich focus leads to discharge of bacteria in the subarachnoid space and further complications. So release of these tubercles into the subarachnoid space results in an adhesive exudate around the basal systems, which the obstruction of CSF causes hydrocephalus, and it also compromises the cranial nerves also. So granulomas can combine to form tuberculomas or anapses, and it also produces an obliterative vasculitis because of uh, compromisation of vasculatures. It results in obliterative vasculitis, which results in infarction and stroke syndromes. So this slide is showing various small discrete tubercles over the base of the cerebral hemisphere and convex disc. And sometimes you can also see the thick gelatinous exudates over the basal meninges and the obliterated pontine and interpeninsular systems. Coming to clinical features of tuberculosis meningitis, usually it affects all persons with all ages, but most common in adult patients with other risk factors like chronic alcoholism, diabetes mellitus, and substance abuse, and HIV infection. The common features of this tuberculosis meningitis, usually they may present with low-grade fever more than 2 weeks to 3 weeks, with malaise and headache, predominantly seen in more than 50% of cases. Headache is the most common complaint. And patients may also have other constitutional features like lethargy and confusion. Confusion also one of the most important clue for tuberculosis meningitis. And the neck stiffness is usually seen in more than 75% of cases. And usually all these symptoms evolve over a less rapidity over a period of 1 week to 2 weeks, and sometimes it may take more time to develop. Coming to prodromal symptoms, usually these prodromal symptoms may last from 2 weeks to 8 weeks until the development of classic features of meningitis, that is, with the neck stiffness, Kernig sign, and Brudzinski sign. So next most phase is meningitis phase, and usually patients present with this stage to the hospital with the well-established infection. That is more than 2 weeks, more than 2 to 8 weeks, after 2 to 8 weeks. And another phase is paralytic phase. Usually in this phase, usually patients may present with confusion, stupor, coma, or sometimes they may present with hemiparesis also. And there are some involvement of cranial nerves in the tuberculosis meningitis, most commonly ocular palsies, facial palsies, and sometimes they may present with deafness also. If you see fundoscopy, usually they may reveal the papilledema, and sometimes they may present with the choroid tubercles also. Occasionally, the disease may present with the rapid onset of focal neurological deficit because of infarction with signs of raised ICT. Symptoms may be somewhat difficult in young children and infants. So there is uncommon presentation in young children and infants. Usually they may present with apathy, hyperirritability, and sometimes vomiting and seizures. And neck stiffness may not be the predominant feature in young children and infants. Sometimes neck stiffness may be absent in young children and infants. So patients with the tuberculosis meningitis, if you have a strong suspicion, then you have to search for other evidences of active tuberculosis elsewhere in the body. So most common active lesion, tuberculosis lesion, is usually will found in the lungs. So in the slide, you are able to see the right upper lobe cavity So suppose if the pulmonary tuberculosis is with the cavity, if not treated in the early stage, they may develop tuberculosis meningitis. So once you have to, uh, once you have the suspect the tuberculosis meningitis, so you have to see the lungs for a primary lesion. Sometimes primary lesion may be situated in the small bowel, bones, kidneys, or ears. Sometimes patients may have some inactive pulmonary lesions also. Sometimes no evidence of tuberculosis outside the nervous system in others also see. So what happens if the TB meningitis is not treated in the proper time? So suppose if it is not treated in the right time, it may lead to progressive confusion or stupor. Patients may land up in coma with multiple cranial pulses, pupillary abnormalities, or they may land up in hemiplegias with raised ICT, with disabled postures. So suppose if not treated within the right period, so fatal outcome follows within 4 to 8 weeks of the onset of the symptoms. There are some unusual manifestations of tuberculosis meningitis. So movement disorders is one of the unusual manifestations of tuberculosis meningitis. And this is among these movement disorders, tremor is the most common symptom, and other symptoms, chorea, balismus, and myoclonus. So all these movement disorders are mainly due to infarction of the basal ganglia. And the tuberculosis may also affect the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, and they may land up in retarded temperature regulation. And sometimes patients may present with diabetes insipidus or panhypopituitarism. So movement disorders and hypothalamus and pituitary manifestations are unusual manifestations of tuberculosis meningitis. One more entity, tuberculosis encephalopathy. It is first described in Indian disseminated tuberculosis. And this is characterized by coma, convulsions, involuntary, not reported in adults. Coming to diagnosis of meningitis, if you see the most of the times patients may reveal the active or previous tuberculosis infection in 50% of the gold standard investigation choices lumbar puncture and the analysis of CSF. So lumbar puncture should be performed before the administration of antibiotics. Lumbar puncture may be you should require repeated CSF examination. Coming to analysis of CSF, classical findings of CSF in tuberculosis meningitis is there is elevated opening pressure of CSF, and coming to cells, there will be lymphocytic predominance of lymphocytes, usually 10 to 500 cells, and protein levels will be elevated around 50 to 500 milligram per deciliter, and glucose levels will be decreased around 20 to 40 milligram per deciliter. And usually we should collect the CSF in 3 bottles, and the last tube of fluid is the best sample for the smear of AFib. So next most common mode of investigation is culture of CSF. So the culture of Mycobacterium tuberculosis from the CSF is another gold standard diagnostic test for confirmation of tuberculosis meningitis. The main problem here is it takes minimum 4 to 8 weeks to identify the organism. So by this period, patients may develop another complications. So the main disadvantage with the culture of CSF is it takes more time. And another disadvantage with this culture of CSF is it occurs positively in more than around 50% of patients only. So another investigation of choice is PCR. So PCR helps in rapid detection of Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA, and it also has a sensitivity of 70 to 80% only. And the main disadvantage of this PCR is it has some limited availability, and there will be high rate of false positives. So slide is showing some CT or CT of the brain. Here you can able to see the enhancement of the base of the brain because of tuberculous meningitis. So neuroimaging usually shows basal meningeal enhancement. Sometimes patients may develop hydrocephalus. Sometimes patients may show some tuberculomas or infections in the tuberculous meningitis. Here, this slide is showing hydrocephalus, that is enlargement of the ventricles. So next, coming to differential diagnosis of tuberculous meningitis. So in immunocompetent individuals, we have to suspect partially treated pyogenic bacterial meningitis, one of the important differential diagnoses. And another differential diagnosis, viral meningoencephalitis. And the main clue for viral meningoencephalitis is usually there will be decreased consciousness level. And in viral meningoencephalitis, consciousness will be regained. And malignancy of various neoplastic infiltration of the meninges is also one of the important differential diagnoses in tuberculosis meningitis. And neurosarcoidosis and neurosyphilis are differential diagnoses. In suppressed individuals, how to suspect fungal meningitis, one of the important differential diagnoses in immunosuppressed individuals. Cryptococcal meningitis, another differential diagnosis, toxoplasmosis, and meningoencephalitis with herpes simplex virus, cytomegalovirus. So these are viral meningitis. So coming to treatment of tuberculous meningitis, we have to give anti-tuberculous therapy whenever you are suspecting tuberculous meningitis without any wastage of time. So it includes an intensive phase of 4 drugs followed by a continuation phase of 2 drugs. The first 2 months of treatment should include isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol, along with pyridoxine 50 mg per day. Suppose if the clinical response is good, pyrazinamide and ethambutol are discontinued after 8 weeks of therapy, and isoniazid and rifampicin should be continued for next 6 to 12 months of duration. So the duration of ATT is usually around 9 months to 12 months. So British and American guidelines suggest between 9 and 12 months of total anti-TB treatment for tuberculous meningitis. Isoniazid and rifampicin are considered mandatory in the continuation phase, and the therapy should be extended to 18 months in those unable to tolerate pyrazinamide in an intensive phase. So INH, usually it should be given in a dose of 5 mg per kg body weight, around 300 mg per day. And the most common side effects with isoniazid is hepatitis, neuropathy, and hypersensitivity. Coming to second drug anti-tuberculosis, that is rifampicin. Usually it should be given 10 mg per kg per day, around 600 mg. And the most common side effects with rifampicin is it may lead to hepatic toxicity, red color urine, and drug interactions. Pyrazinamide should be given 15 to 30 mg per kg body weight, around 1500 to 2 grams per day. And the most common side effect of pyrazinamide is peripheral neuropathy, and sometimes patients may land up abdominal pain. And streptomycin should be given at a dose of 15 mg per kg per day, and it is usually causes deafness and dizziness. And ethambutol should be given in a dose of 25 to 30 mg per kg body weight, and ethambutol usually causes optic neuritis. So all these 4 drugs we have to give for a period of 8 weeks. So this slide is showing intensive phase, which includes 2 months of therapy with 4 drugs, and the continued phase is usually 9 to 12 months with the 2 drugs. So one more entity is drug-resistant tuberculous meningitis. So resistance to one or more first-line anti-tuberculosis is an increasingly common problem, and isoniazid resistance alone does not appear to have a major impact on outcome from tuberculosis meningitis. And multi-drug resistance, that is resistance to rifampicin and isoniazid. Most patients will die unless second-line therapy is started early. So multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is becoming a more common problem in tuberculosis meningitis. So how to treat a multi-drug resistant tuberculosis? This is a difficult problem, and when you are suspecting tuberculosis multi-drug resistant tuberculosis meningitis, you should follow the principles of treating the drug-resistant pulmonary tuberculosis, and you should use at least 3 previously unused drugs, one of which should be a fluoroquinolone. And the streptomycin resistance does not confer resistance to other aminoglycosides. Therefore, amikacin or kanamycin can be used. And treatment should be continued for at least 18 months in case of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis meningitis. There are various second-line drugs are available, and among these aminoglycosides like amikacin or kanamycin, polypeptides like capreomycin, vaomycin, and fluoroquinolones like cipro, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, cycloserine, para-aminosalicylic acid. So all these are second-line drugs. And use of corticosteroids in tuberculosis meningitis is it should be given to patients with hydrocephalus or raised intracranial pressure along with anti-tuberculosis therapy. So current evidence suggests that all HIV uninfected patients with tuberculosis meningitis should be given dexamethasone regardless of age or disease severity. So a clear benefit of dexamethasone in HIV infected patients has not been demonstrated, but some trials in Vietnam suggest that it might be safe and improve survival when you combine corticosteroids. So how to give corticosteroids? So usually corticosteroids should be given in adults with a GCS score of less than 50. We have to give first 4 weeks, we have to give the intravenous dexamethasone, then followed by oral drug. So intravenous dexamethasone should be given in the first week 0.4 milligram per kg per day. In the second week, we have to taper the dose 0.3 milligram per kg body weight. In the third and fourth week, we have to taper the dose from 0.2 to 0.1 milligram per kg body weight. So after 4 weeks, we have to give oral steroids like prednisolone. You have to start with 4 milligram of oral prednisolone, and you have to reduce the oral prednisolone also weekly 1 milligram. And in adults without coma or focal neurological deficit, you have to continue the intravenous corticosteroids up to 2 weeks with 0.2 milligram per kg per day in the first week, and second week you have to taper the dose to 0.1 milligram per kg per week per day. So up to 2 weeks you have to give the intravenous dose, followed by oral therapy 4 milligram of prednisolone with tapering. After initiation of anti-tuberculosis therapy, you have to assess the response to the therapy, and suppose if the patients have any another complications of tuberculosis meningitis, you should also treat the complications of tuberculosis meningitis. So more than 90% of deaths with tuberculosis meningitis occurs in the first month of treatment. So first initial you carefully assess the treatment of tuberculosis meningitis. So if you carefully follow the patients, and you can reduce the deaths of the patients. So the response to therapy is usually slow and can follow a fluctuant course. And headache is usually present for many weeks, even in uncomplicated cases. And fever usually disappears within a week, and pyrexia is often observed for 6 to 8 weeks. So fever is also present for 6 to 8 weeks when you are continuing the anti-tuberculosis therapy. And neck rigidity usually it varies considerably and can take 4 to 6 weeks to resolve. And there will be some transient episodes of high fever, worsening headache, and increased local rigidity in the first 2 months of treatment, particularly patients with severe tuberculosis meningitis. So what happens to the CSF with the anti-tuberculosis therapy? Usually the CSF mirrors the slow clinical response, and the cell count, that is a lymphocytic predominant ESF pulses, usually remain elevated for 1 to 2 months after the initiation of therapy, and glucose levels also low for 1 to 2 months, and proteins, they can slowly rise before falling slowly over a period of months. Coming to complications of tuberculosis meningitis, they most commonly they present with hydrocephalus and infarctions of brain parenchyma, or sometimes extrapyramidal structures, and they may present with stupor or coma, and the seizures, one of the important complications of tuberculosis meningitis, and sometimes patients may present mental impairment, abnormal behavior. Coming to prognosis of tuberculosis meningitis, the overall mortality of patients with CNS tuberculosis is approximately 10%. Infants and elderly patients are the greatest risk. Among HIV-infected patients, the mortality from tuberculosis meningitis is considerably higher, that is around 21%. Most resistant tuberculosis in developed countries is a result of intermittent and ineffective therapy. So to avoid this resistant tuberculosis, we have to give the DOTS therapy, that is directly absorbed therapy for at least 2 months, mainly to prevent the resistance to the various drugs. Coming to residual neurological sequelae of tuberculosis meningitis, the mortality rate is nearly 50% in patients with a severe disease, that is with tuberculosis meningitis with coma, and between 20 to 30% of survivors from tuberculosis meningitis, they manifest with various neurological sequelae, like they may have some diminished intellectual function, and they will have some other psychiatric disturbances, and so recurrent seizures is one of the residual neurological sequelae of tuberculosis meningitis, and patients may land up in some visual or oculomotor disorders and deafness, and sometimes patients may have some hemiparesis also. How to prevent this tuberculosis meningitis? So by giving BCG immunization, we can prevent the disseminated tuberculosis in young children. And the BCG immunization at birth almost prevents around 70% of all cases of childhood tuberculosis meningitis, and it is a highly cost-effective intervention. So BCG immunization you have to advise for all births. Tuberculosis meningitis can also be prevented by treating the household contacts of newly diagnosed cases of pulmonary tuberculosis. So by tracing the household contacts of newly diagnosed cases of tuberculosis meningitis, pulmonary meningitis, we will control can prevent the tuberculosis meningitis. So by treating of Mantoux positive contacts to prevent progression of active disease. So to prevent this, that is called latent tuberculosis. So for latent tuberculosis, you have to give a 6 months course of isoniazid, or 3 months course of isoniazid or rifampicin should be given. So that is about tuberculosis meningitis. So treatment should be given to the, you should give minimum 9 months to 12 months. Suppose if patients have severe disease, we have to continue the treatment for more than 12 months also. And the patients with multi-drug resistance tuberculosis meningitis, we have to continue the treatment for up to 18 months also, we have to continue. And before and after the initiation of anti-tuberculosis therapy, we have to monitor the liver function test and renal function test, and in between we have to examine the eyes and ears. So mainly to prevent the side effects of anti-tuberculosis drugs. So this is about tuberculosis meningitis. So in the next class, we will discuss about viral meningitis and encephalitis. Thank you.